relationship is modern.
Alrighty. How's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Yeah?
Great.
Great.
Awesome.
Great. Awesome. So I'm actually going to share my testimony tonight, one of my testimonies. And it's a little nerve-wracking because I could definitely get like emotional. But I hope I don't get emotional, especially if there's like more guys here tonight. Usually it's like a lot of girls. I'm like, oh, ladies' night. But not tonight. So what I'm going to share on, I don't think many of you will be able to relate to, but I'm hoping that you can parallel it. Have a parallel in your life somewhere. What I'm going to share on. So when Joel and I were engaged, I remember sitting in the Roadhouse Grill on Trans Road, and we were discussing our future together because we were engaged, and we were talking about kids. We were talking about we were not going to have any kids because kids are expensive, and then you don't have any privacy, and like you can't go travel anymore, and you have to wait till they're older and move out of the house. And I was kind of like set in my career, and he was doing good with my dad, and we were just kind of doing our thing. Like, why do we want kids, to like get in the way of all this? So we went into marriage saying, no kids, no kids. And I never, I was not the babysitting type. Like, I babysat until I was 11, so I babysat for about 1 year of my life. And whenever a kid would cry, I'd be like, I don't know what to do with you. You got a dirty diaper, someone take care of this. So I was just never, into kids, growing up until, my nephew. I practically raised my nephew when he was little, but that's besides the point. He was my nephew. But then, we got married, and about 3 months into our marriage, I woke up one day and I'm like, I want to have kids. I just changed my mind. I want to have kids. So, I went to the doctor and took the steps, and you're good. Go ahead and try to have kids. And so we started trying in May, and that's when I found out I was pregnant. I'm like, this is easy. We're having kids now. And it was all of a sudden, it was the hype of it all. As soon as we found out that we were pregnant, we went out and we got clothes, and I got the heartbeat monitor, which ladies don't ever get because it just does not work at all. I don't think it will work until the day you're going to give birth, and all of a sudden you hear a heartbeat, oh, he's alive, But, so we were very, very excited. And I'm the type of person, I'm very impatient, so I just wanted to get out there and, get everything I could. And I assumed it was a boy because he had so many boys in his family. And so we went and we got boy clothes and a boy, the blue blanket and stuff like that. Well, then the unexpected happened. And I was about 10 weeks along. And I woke up, it was a Sunday morning, and I was bleeding. So I called my doctor because I was like, I've never been pregnant before, so maybe this is normal, maybe these things just happen. And she said, take it easy, put your feet up, relax, we don't know what it is, these things have happened before. And on Monday, you go and get some blood work done. So I was, standing in faith, everything's fine, and praying. My family came over and we were praying together, and we were just, standing in faith that, the baby was okay and everything was going to work out. And for me, I was just like, I wouldn't have a miscarriage. Bad things don't happen to me. These things don't happen. So I convinced myself that everything was going to be fine. So Monday morning, I went to get the blood work, and I was, all smiles on my face. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be okay, And I had to get blood work done on Monday, and then I had to go back on that Wednesday to get blood work again because it was going to be a comparison. So if my pregnancy hormone level went up, that meant baby was progressing and going well. If it went down, that means I lost the baby. So Wednesday, went in again, smile on my face, everything's going to be great, everything's going to be okay. And Wednesday afternoon comes, and I get the call from my doctor saying that I lost the baby. So at that point, my mom was with me, Joel was at work. And it was kind of I just felt my whole body just go limp. I was just what? No, this is not happening to me. These things don't happen to me. I was going to get emotional. But that definitely was the darkest hour of my life. No one in my life had ever died before. I never lost a grandparent. I still have my grandparents to this day that I had from when I was born. no one, I've never lost anyone, and now I lost my own baby. So that was the biggest blow of my life. And for the next 2 weeks, I just cried every day. Like, it's just like, once you know that you're going to become a mom, and then that's taken away from you, it's like everything's lost. Like, what am I here for? What am I doing, you know? And I didn't know how I was going to get over it. I'm like, how does one even, like, get through something like this? And at that point, I didn't know anyone who had a miscarriage. Like, I was, like, the only one. I thought, like, you know, this doesn't happen to anyone but me, you know? And one night, about 2 weeks after the miscarriage, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was in heaven, and I was in labor, and I was delivering my baby, and angels were the doctors, and angels took the baby, and it was a girl, and she was blonde, and had pigtails, and she was cute, and they brought her in a little bassinet and put her next to me, and she looked at me and she smiled. And that, I know, like, God was just, like, mending my heart back together. And I knew at that point, like, I felt like God told me I needed this baby in heaven with me. I needed another angel. And so that's what I'm convinced is what happened, because, you know, people would come up to me and they would give me all these reasons, you know, why maybe the baby had birth defects, you know, maybe, you know, it wasn't the right timing, or this, that, or the other. And I'm like, I don't want to hear this. If the baby had birth defects, I prayed. He should have healed him, you know. It was that simple. I mean, I was standing on faith. But when this happened, it crushed my faith. My faith was broken, and I thought I had unbreakable faith. Well, that broke my faith. So over the next couple of years, Joel and I, we tried again to, you know, get pregnant. And several times I would get a positive pregnancy test, and a few days later my cycle would begin. And I'm like, what? Like, I've never heard of, like, false positives, you know, like, what's this? Eventually, my doctor sent me to, like, the fertility clinic to go on, you know, different drugs that would, you know, supposedly help me get pregnant. They would do all this blood work on me. They couldn't find anything that was wrong with me. They didn't know why, you know, this happened. And the doctor was very hesitant to even send me there, because she's like, you've only had one miscarriage. Like, this happens all the time. And I'm like, what do you mean this happens all the time? She's like, many women don't even realize it, but they have miscarriages. This happens all the time. And I'm like, well, I just feel like there's something wrong, and so I want to get this checked out, you know, because it's been 2 years now. Still can't get pregnant. You know, what if this miscarriage, like, messed me up? But they couldn't find anything. And a few months, I actually stopped going. I stopped the fertility treatments because I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And a couple months after I stopped the fertility treatments, lo and behold, I got pregnant again. And this time I was like, all right, you know, this time, this is it. This is gonna work, you know. And in my eyes, it was the perfect time. We just bought a house. We had good jobs. You know, everything was going well. And I'm like, this has to be, you know, God's timing. Everything's perfect in our lives. You know, nothing. You know, this. If I had my choice, this would be when I would get pregnant. So I called my doctor right away. I'm like, oh, I got a positive pregnancy test. They're like, we'll see you in 8 weeks. I'm like, 8 weeks? I'm like, my last, you know, pregnancy ended in a miscarriage at 10 weeks, and you want to see me at 12 weeks? I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Well, that's just routine. You know, we'll see you in 8 weeks. And I'm like, this just doesn't sit well with me. And so I was talking with my sister-in-law, Laura, and she's like, you should go see my doctor. She's so good, and I bet, you know, she would probably see you right away. And I'm like, oh, no, you know, everything's going to line up. This is going to work this time. It's going to be okay. So about a week and a half later, after mulling over, you know, everything, I'm like, maybe I will call her doctor and just see. So I called her doctor and talked with the nurse, just the nurse on the phone. And as I was explaining, you know, the miscarriage I had and, you know, getting the positive pregnancy test, but then, you know, not so. And she's like, that sounds exactly like low progesterone. I'm like, low progesterone? I've never, you know, heard of that before. And she's like, we need to see you immediately because low progesterone, you know, early miscarriages are indicative of low progesterone. So she took me in the very next day, sent me for blood work that day. That night, we were at the tab for youth group. Joel and I were leaders in the youth group. And I got a phone call from the doctor while we were there. And she said, things don't look that good. You said you're 6 to 7 weeks along. upon your exam, she's like, I could, you're pregnant, but it felt to me like you were just pregnant. And the tests show that, your progesterone level should be at 20, and you're at a 3. And your pregnancy hormone should be, way higher than it is. So she's like, I have a feeling it's too late, but let me prescribe some progesterone to you, and, let's see what happens. Well, I went back to the youth, and we all started praying. All the youth gathered around me and laid hands, and everyone was praying. I'm like, this, God is going to do a miracle. All these youth are praying for me. God would not let me lose this baby with all these youth praying for me. This is definitely going to be a good thing. Well, I lost the baby the next day. And that was probably even a bigger blow to me that time than the first time, because first of all, if I would have gone in a week and a half earlier, maybe the baby could have been saved when my sister-in-law told me to go in. And I was more worried about the youth and their faith getting crushed, because I was telling them, I know God's going to do a miracle because you guys prayed for me in here. The miracle did not happen. So that was bad. That was really bad. And I was, heartbroken again. And it was like just going through it all over again. And to top off that week, how I said, we had good jobs and everything was going great in our lives. Well, about 3 days after the miscarriage, I got laid off from my job. And the day after that, Joel's car died on the side of the road, on the thruway. So in 1 week, our entire lives, it felt like just fell apart. And I'm like, are you kidding me? What else could possibly happen? Or should I not even ask that question, How else could it get any worse than it is right now? So, I really blame myself for a lot of what had happened. And I had a lot of questions that just were going unanswered at the time. I didn't understand how this could happen again. I was not dealing with it well. But God knew how to take care of things. The next day, I was at my parents' house, so I didn't want to be alone, and that's where Joel works. He works at my parents' house, and I was there, and I saw a Bible laid on the kitchen table, and I'm just like, I'm just going to read. I'm like, I don't even know what to read, but I'm just going to read. And so I opened the Bible, and I opened to Isaiah 54, and I started reading, and it said, "Sing, O barren woman, you who never bore a child, burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labor, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband." And at the time, I didn't exactly know what that meant, but I obviously knew God was speaking to me, since I just opened the Bible and that was right there. So I knew he was showing me that he had not forgotten about me. And a couple days later, the most strange thing happened. I did the same thing, and I just opened the Bible again, and I opened to Galatians 4. And I started reading there. And Galatians 4:27 says, "Sing, O barren woman, you who never bore a child, burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labor, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband." And I'm like, okay, God's definitely saying something to me now. And I learned that was referring to Abraham's wife, Sarah, and Hagar. And God was telling Sarah that she would have a child. Sarah was 80-something when she had Isaac. So deep inside, I knew God was telling me that someday I was going to have kids. But, I did not know how to receive that word, though, after going through a devastating loss. Sometimes I think God can speak to us, right where we need to be spoken to, but it's so hard to receive because you're like, but God, it hasn't happened. These horrible things happened. Why didn't I have baby then? Why did you take the baby from me? So, the Sunday night at church at the tab, I was feeling really depressed and really, really down, and the worship team started singing "It Is You." And in the song it says, "You take my brokenness, draw me to yourself, there you stand with healing in your hands." And I lost it. I totally broke down, and I just cried out to God to just heal my heart, because I just felt like I had the biggest hole in my heart, and I didn't know what to do with it. everyone's like, give it to God, give it to God. I'm like, God, I don't know how to give it to you. Like, just take it from me because I can't carry this anymore. Like, I don't know what to do with this. So I just sat and buried my head in my hands, and I just cried. And, you know, God did a spiritual healing in me that night. You know, I felt like, you know, it physically hurt. Like, the pain in my heart was just, like, physically hurt. And I was desperate for his healing, and he definitely did a healing in me that night. So I decided to go back on fertility drugs again. And after only about 3 months, I gave up on it again. Because it was just too much to carry. It was like too much of a burden. Like, I was tired of like constantly striding for it. I just couldn't do it anymore. It had been 4 years since Joel and I decided to start trying to have kids, and I was pretty discouraged at that point. I had so many people coming up and giving me words and things like that. So many people prayed for me. Even Joel's mom came up one night after church, and she laid hands on me and prayed for me, passing on the blessing of having children, because she had like 8 children. So she like tried to like pass the blessing on to me, which was definitely meant a lot to me. And even one morning, I went to a Tuesday morning Bible study, and at the end of Bible study, we were all in a circle praying together, and instead of praying with everybody else, I was kind of wallowing in self-pity and just like talking to God, and I was just like, God, you know, I understand, like, if you don't want me to have kids, like, we'll just adopt, and I know you're going to help me to feel like they're my own flesh and blood, you know, like, I'll live with that, like, that will be good, like, we'll just adopt and that will be okay. And right when the prayer was over, this woman, who I, like, really did not know at all, called me over to her, and she's like, come here, I got to tell you something. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what's up? And she goes, God just told me to tell you that you're going to have your own kids and to not worry about it. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you have no idea the conversation I was just having with God. And to me, like, that was crazy. Like, that was crazy, but it was God. But but you know, at the same time, I was so worn down. You know, I'd had words, nothing like that, but I'd had words before. I'd been prayed over before. I'd been pushed down, everything, and like nothing had happened yet, you know? So I was just like, you know, I was just weary. I was just like, I came to a point where I was like, forget it. I'm done with this. You know, I'm not trying this anymore. This is too much. It was probably spring, and that summer I had 2 weddings. My sister was getting married in Florida. We were going for, you know, down to Florida. I had another friend who was getting married. I'm like, I need to just lose some weight and get healthy and get ready for these weddings. So that's what I did. And one morning, when Joel was preaching, or he worked for the Korean church, he was the English pastor for the Korean church, and I led worship for him. And I just finished, you know, doing worship, and I wasn't feeling so good. So I told Joel, I'm like, I'm not really feeling well. Do you mind if I go home? And he's like, sure, go ahead. He had a meeting after church, and I just did not feel like staying for like the whole thing. So on my way home, I was thinking, I'm like, I'm actually kind of late. And I'm like, maybe I'll stop and get a pregnancy test. Because, I mean, I still wanted to have kids. I was just tired of, like, trying. Like, I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. But I do still want to have kids. And I knew that if I was pregnant, I needed to find out right away because I needed to get on the progesterone immediately. So, got home, took a pregnancy test. Sure enough, I was pregnant. So, went to the doctors. Yeah, my progesterone was low, but not low enough to make anything bad happen. So she put me on progesterone right away, and 9 months later, on February 8th, 2005, I had Elijah. And, you know, the whole pregnancy was really hard because, like, I felt like I was just waiting for something bad to happen. I remember being 32 weeks along, and that right around that time, I found out that an acquaintance of mine lost her baby at 36 weeks. So I remember like crying to Joel's mom, like, I just know like something bad's gonna happen. Like, it's just, I just feel like, you know, it's not gonna happen. It's like not gonna work, and like something terrible is gonna happen. But at the same time, I was sick with Elijah for 8 months. Morning sickness every day for 8 months. And women, morning sickness is a sign of a very healthy pregnancy. So I remember like his mom just telling me, Sammy, like, you're fine. Like, really, you're fine. You like just threw up in my bathroom 5 minutes ago. You're good. So sure enough, you know, I was fine. We were fine. You know, I had Elijah. And, you know, after Elijah was born, I'm like, it took us 4 years to get pregnant. Like, it's not going to happen again for a while. Well, Elijah was 7 months, and surprise, pregnant again with Joey. So, and now we have 4 little runs running around. So, yeah, God is good. God heals. God knows what He's doing. So, you know, I learned a lot through that struggle and how to deal with heartbreak and disappointments. And, you know, I don't think any one heartbreak or disappointment can prepare you for the next one you're going to have, but it certainly makes you stronger. And it certainly teaches you how to persevere and not give up. You know, when God's promised you something and things just seem to be going in the opposite direction and nothing seems to be going right, you know, God's promises stand in your life. You know, He does not give up on you. He does not let you go. His promises do not go void. They don't run out or expire, even if, like, you're, like, do something, like, terrible, you know. They don't go away. I had started reading a book by Joel Osteen called Live Your Best Life Now, and I would highly recommend that book. I know some people are like, with Joel Osteen, but this is really a good book. And he says in the book, you can't unscramble eggs. What's done is done. You can't put a question mark where God's put a period. So don't question what God's going to do. Believe it. Know it. Live for that. So instead of focusing on the past and the bad things that happened in the past, we need to look ahead to the future and do our best to make our future a good future. Don't sabotage it. We need to trust that God knows what He's doing and He sees the whole picture beginning to end. And we do have the mind of Christ. So we need to start looking at our circumstances through His eyes. I know it's hard when you see other people getting their answers, or they're walking into their future destiny, and like they're living this great life, and you know everything's hunky-dory. I mean, first of all, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors in that person's life, okay? But you know, you see that, and you're like, I'm having just as much faith as they're having. Like, I'm taking all the right steps. I'm like by the book. I'm doing everything I should be doing, but nothing is working out. Keep standing. Never give up on your future dreams. The scripture tells us that when we've done all we can do to stand, keep standing, keep praying, keep believing, keep having hope. And that's what we have to stand on. Know that you can't do it on your own. You got to release your burden to God and trust Him to take care of it. But never stop believing that He could come through for you. And I know, you know, like I said before, a lot of people's question is, how do I give it to God? Like, I don't know how to give it to God. And that's a hard thing to do. It's really a heart change that has to happen. And that's something that only comes through intense prayer with God. You know, if you're struggling with something, if there's something that's weighing you down or burdening you, it's something that you just have to take to prayer. And really, I always tell people the ball's in your court. You know, you could choose to hold on to it and live with it and walk with it, and it could be your buddy, you know, and you just walk around with this like burden and this hard thing. But that's not what God wants you to do. God wants you to just surrender it to Him, and surrendering it to might just be saying, God, I give this to you, whatever that means. I give this to you. Please take it from me. You know, teach me how to give this to you. And a lot of times it's changing your focus. And some of you have probably heard me tell you this before. Is, you know, if you're solely focused on yourself, which a lot of us do a lot. We're very focused on ourselves, so that's all you're going to think about is your burdens. But if you ask the Lord, God, give me something else to focus on. You know, bring someone into my life that I can help. You know, give me a cause. You know, give me something that I can focus on that's your will, that you want me to be doing. And God will give that to you, and your focus goes right off of you and onto that other person and onto God and how you're going to work with this other person for the Lord. Mm-hmm. So it's a very easy thing to just take your mind off yourself and put it on something else. I spent a long time wallowing in my self-pity, and I let my heartbreak define who I was. And that is something that will hold you back. when all you can see is your own problems and you're stuck in self-pity, the world will move on and you'll stay right where you're at. God will not take us to a new place until we're perfectly content with where we're at and we're learning from our trials. So one of my big statements that, if you could remember, is we have to take our focus off of the things that we cannot control and put it onto the things that we can see God doing good works through. So I'll say it one more time. We have to take our focus off of the things that we cannot control and put it on the things that we can see God doing good works through. So, you know, me not being able to get pregnant or miscarrying, I had no control over that. No control, but that was where all my focus was for so long. So instead of focusing on the good things God was doing in my life, I was solely focused on one thing that I didn't get, because I wasn't getting what I wanted. So that doesn't mean we stop praying for it or being proactive and taking steps toward that goal or dream or whatever it is. But you just don't make it your obsession or allow it to put your life on hold because, like I said, the world's moving on with or without us. So I don't know many people who fully understand God's timing. I do not understand God's timing. I mean, I can look back on things and see where God's timing was good. But there are some things that I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know how that was your timing, but it's done and over with, so whatever. I don't understand his timing, but I know it's perfect. And that's all I need to know. There's nothing we can do to speed up his timing, but I can tell you there's sure a lot we can do to slow it down. Whining, complaining, having a negative attitude, trying to fix our problems in our own way are all plenty of things that will slow down God's timing in our lives and slow up his promises from coming. Because he will not reveal his promises or let his promises come forth until we're ready. And until we stop trying to do things our way because we think our way is better than God's way. When we can just let it go and let it happen, and we can show God, I'm happy where I'm at, I'm doing your work, and whenever you want to bring it to me, great. That's when it will come. That includes finding your mate. I think there's a lot of young people who are looking for a husband or a wife and they just can't come quick enough, you know. But it's not going to be until you relax. Be happy. Date God. Men, you can date God, okay? Date God. And when you are happy and God's happy with his relationship with you, then your mate will come along. It'll happen. So we need to trust that God knows what he's doing. And he will give us things as he sees fit when we're ready for them. In 1 Peter 4:12 says we should not be surprised by the trials we face. You know, as Christians, we have a big enemy. You know, the devil just wants to make us downright miserable. He wants us to die, okay? So he's going to do whatever he can to make us miserable. And God allows him to do so much to test our faith. Because when our faith is tested, we get stronger. And our character develops more. And people look at us and they're like, wow, they went through that, and look at them now. Wow, what a testimony. You know, there are women that I can speak into their lives that no one else can. Because when you go through a loss of a child or miscarriage or whatever, people who've not gone through that, you're like, you have no idea what I'm going through. You know, that when I went through the miscarriages, so many people were so awkward around me. Like, no one knew what to say, and, like, everyone was, like, really weird, and I'm just like, this is, like, so awkward. Like, talk about, like, adding insult to injury. Like, it was just bad. So, you know, the things you go through, you can talk to people that no one else can. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is Joyce Myers, who I love Joyce Myers. And she had a sermon on, some of you I'm sure have heard this before. And she said, if a tree doesn't bear fruit, or if we are not bearing fruit, God has to prune us so that we start bearing fruit. And if a tree is bearing fruit, or we're bearing fruit, God still has to prune us so that we produce better fruit. So she said, you're pruned if you do, you're pruned if you don't. That's my favorite saying. The pruning's going to hurt, but when it's complete, we'll be living our lives by God's design, not our own. If we live our lives by God's design, we will truly feel fulfilled. We will not feel like we're lacking in any place, because we will know that God is at work in our lives and that we're fulfilling His purposes and will. And, I remember, going through, feeling like I was in the depths of despair. I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was a miserable person when I was pregnant with Elijah. Like people would think that I should be so grateful after all that I went through. I'm finally pregnant and here I'm complaining. I was literally nauseous 24/7. There was not 2 seconds during a day where I felt okay. I was sick all day, every day for 8 months straight. And I listened to that pruning service during my time of morning sickness and just laying in bed and like just not even wanting to see the light of day. Like I was just a miserable person. And just being like, God, prune me please, but let me just learn the lessons so I can move on from this. And I just felt like I was in the depths of despair. But what I wasn't seeing at the time was like, whoa, like here's like your dream. Here's like what you've been begging God for. And God has given you every sign in the world that you're having a wonderful, healthy pregnancy. And you're still doubting and you're still having these problems. So when I was pregnant with Josiah, only 7 months later, like I remember right away being like, no, God, please, stop the morning sickness again. But it started off shaky, but it was much better than Elijah. And I'm like, see, God, I learned my lesson. Now I'm not going to have so much morning sickness. So seriously, learn. Just ask the Lord to like open your eyes. When you're going through a hard time, just ask Him, God, what are you trying to show me through this? Instead of saying, God, get me out of here, make this situation pass from me, it's better to say, God, open my eyes. What are you trying to teach me through this? And help me to learn it quick. Help me to get it. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to be so stuck in my self-pity and woe is me that I'm totally missing what you're trying to show me. So gratefulness is a big thing that God is looking for. I know even with our kids, when we do good things for our kids and then they complain, we're like, why did we even do this for you? Like, you're bugging me, And I feel like God probably does the same thing with us. Like, here, I've been giving you all these blessings and you're complaining about the one thing you don't have. So let's, carry an attitude of gratefulness. Don't give up on your hope. Don't give up on faith. Surround yourself with people who will lift you up and encourage you and believe with you in prayer. And just stand. Just keep standing. When you've done all you can do to stand. Don't lay down and just say, I give up. That's not what God wants you to do. God wants you to persevere and keep moving forward. So, that's all I got.